Minister Penrose.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to thank members for Moray and Nottingham North and, of course, Caerphilly for their contributions to the debate on this group of amendments concerning the significant electoral powers that are going to be transferred to the Scottish Parliament and Scottish Government. And I hope to respond to as many of the points as I can, as well as perhaps beginning by dealing with a number of minor and technical government amendments first before we get on to the meat of the points that have been made during the debate so far. So beginning with Government Amendments 93, 94 and 97, they amend and clarify the reserved undevolved powers in Clause 3 about enforcement provisions within the Political Parties Elections and Referendums Act 2000, where they apply to other provisions which are also reserved. And Government Amendments 95 and 96 remove sections which do not need to be reserved in the Political Parties Elections and Referendums Act as well. Amendments 106 and 107 are minor and technical amendments. 106 repeals the subsections inserted into the Scotland Act 1998 by Section 13 of the Scotland Act 2012. Clause 11 brings the function of making an order in council under Sections 15.1 and 2 of the 1998 Act within devolved competence, and these subsections are therefore no longer required. Amendment 107 repeals Section 13 of the Scotland Act 2012 entirely. Amendment 101 is an amendment relating to Clause 5. Clause 5 concerns the timing of Scottish parliamentary elections and local government elections in Scotland. It will ensure that general elections for the Scottish Parliament cannot be held on the same day as general election to the UK Parliament or a general election to the European Parliament or a local government election in Scotland. This is in line with the Smith Commission agreement, as we heard from the Honourable Member for Moray. I hope that the Honourable Member for Moray will be pleased to hear that the purpose of Amendment 101 is to remove the provision from the clause that says general elections to Scottish Parliament cannot be held in the 2 months preceding a general election to the UK Parliament or general election to the European Parliament. This brings us more closely in line with the Smith Commission, and I hope is an example of cross-party working on this one at least. Amendments 92 and 98 are also minor and technical. The purpose of Amendment 92 is to protect the individual electoral registration digital service from future technical changes, such as the transfer of functions between UK government ministers. Effectively, it's a future-proofing move rather than anything more than that. Were Amendment 92 not to be made, the effect may be to place an unintentional constraint on the future actions of both the UK and Scottish governments. This amendment should protect against the potential need to amend the Act as the registration of electors and verification of applications to register via a digital service evolves. Because of Amendment 92, the definition of digital service and of elections in Scotland in Clause 3 are no longer required. Amendment 98 therefore removes these definitions. This amendment does not make the reservation any wider, but gives additional clarity to what is to remain reserved, i.e. the digital service itself, but obviously not the powers which have been devolved to the Scottish Parliament to make, and how it may exercise those powers. Amendments 99 and 100 are again minor and technical. The purpose of these two amendments is to reflect the changes made to the reservation of the IER digital service in Clause 3 by Amendment 92. And Amendment 99 ensures that subsection 4 of the new Section 12 of the Scotland Act 1998 refers to the amended reservation of the digital service in Clause 3. I trust everybody is taking notes and following closely. Amendment 100 removes a now unnecessary definition of the digital service in Clause 4, again as a result of the amended reservation of the digital service in Clause 3. And Amendments 102 to 105 are technical amendments which reflect the changes made to the reservation of the IER digital service in Clause 3 by Amendment 92. The first of these amendments, Amendment 102, ensures that the regulation-making power of the Scottish ministers in this provision refers to the amended reservation of the digital service in Clause 3. The second amendment, Amendment 103, removes the definitions of the digital service and the use of the digital service from this clause. These definitions are no longer technically required. And the third amendment, Amendment 104, ensures that Clause 6 refers to the amended reservation of the digital service as made by the amendment to Clause 3. The final amendment removes the definitions of the digital service and elections in Scotland, which are also no longer required as a result of the third amendment. I beg to move these amendments and will now turn to the specific amendments which have been moved and are part of this wider group, Mr. Chairman. If I start with Amendment 42 and the elements of Amendments 60 and 61, which relate to Clauses 3 and 5, and the continued reservation of certain combination of polls. These clauses fulfil the Smith Commission agreement devolving significant electoral powers to the Scottish Parliament, whilst ensuring polls for Scottish parliamentary general elections will not be held on the same day as UK parliamentary general elections, European parliamentary general elections, or ordinary local government elections in Scotland, which have been devolved already. Yeah.
Sorry. Could you just explain why the entirety of the administration of Scottish parliamentary elections and local government elections are devolved to the Scottish Parliament, but the UK Parliament reserves the right to not have Scottish parliamentary elections and local government elections on the same day? Why would they just not all be devolved to allow the Scottish Parliament to make that decision?
Well, Mr. Chairman, a question which I asked myself not a very short while ago. The reason is, I think, fairly straightforward, which is that although those two powers are, as he rightly points out, devolved, there is a reserve power about whether or not the rules surrounding them and whether or not they can happen on the same day. Changing that power is a reserve power, and therefore it makes sense, since that is a reserve power, to keep any potential combination of those elections as a reserve power for the time being, because the two powers match up. Were the two not to be, were it to be within the competence of the Scottish Parliament to vary that, then it would therefore make sense for the Scottish Parliament to have, or the Scottish Government to have the power to adjust the combination rules as well. But as it is, the two match up, I hope, quite closely. Sure.
I'm grateful for his explanation when it comes to those respects were reserved as devolved. But the key issue we face as we go forward the next year is the possibility and the prospect of the EU referendum being held on the same day as the Scottish parliamentary elections. Would he like to take this opportunity to say what he thinks about this and possibly rule this out? Because we cannot have the prospect of 16 and 17-year-olds coming into the polling booth, possibly being ID'd as they vote in the Scottish Parliament election, and then being turned out because they can't vote in the EU referendum.
We've got to watch out we don't go out of the scope of what we're discussing, and that's the danger. As much as you want to tempt the Minister, I want him to try and stick within the scope, and I'm sure he'll be able to try and answer somewhere along the way. Minister Penn.
Mr. Chairman, I will endeavour to be as helpful as I can when I get to Amendment 43, which is very closely adjacent to the points which the honourable gentleman was making, without, I hope, trying your patience in the process. So, where was I? Yes, the clauses fulfil the Smith Commission agreement devolving significant electoral powers to the Scottish Parliament, while ensuring polls for Scottish parliamentary ordinary general elections will not be held on the same day as UK parliamentary general elections, European general elections, or ordinary government elections, as we just discussed. The UK Government considers that the timing and combination of polls are intrinsically linked, and I think this is the point which we may just have covered here, but I want to make sure it's clear on the record. It is for that reason that the combination of polls involving a reserve poll with a poll at a Scottish parliamentary election or local government election in Scotland continues to be reserved, as does the combination of a poll at a Scottish parliamentary general election with a poll at a local government election in Scotland. That's why I would urge honourable members to withdraw these amendments for the reasons I've just given. I now come on to Amendment 43. Amendment 43 seeks to ensure that it would not be possible for a Scottish parliamentary general election to be held on the same day as a referendum called under reserved powers. I should say, Mr. Chairman, that I think the member for Caerphilly gets top marks for ingenuity in that he is trying to shoehorn a measure which really affects tomorrow's business into the Scottish bill in front of us today. However, I do understand that there are strong views on this issue, and I want to promise him considering them carefully. He will, of course, know, Mr. Chairman, that there is an amendment tabled for the business tomorrow, which is very, very similar to this one, which will allow this issue to be debated in some depth. And I would encourage, therefore, members on my side of the House to resist the opportunity to support this in any way at this point, if only because I don't think it would be right for members of other devolved parliaments and assemblies who may have elections on the same day as the Scottish elections next year, for a measure such as this to be dealt with in a Scottish bill when we have the opportunity to deal with it properly during the course of business tomorrow. Can I though say that I do accept the member for Caerphilly's point? He was absolutely right to point out the Electoral Commission's view on the combination of polls. They are very, very cautious and very, very concerned about excessive combination of polls because of the potential for confusion in the electors' minds. Now, I think we would all agree, or I hope we would all agree, Mr. Chairman, that this is a statement which is true within boundaries. We are all, I'm sure, familiar with occasions. In fact, May the 8th was a good example in many parts of the country where there were general election polls on the same day as local election polls. So it is possible to combine some polls without any ill effects, and electors are very, very used to that. But if you combine too many of them on the same day, and potentially also on combined ballot papers, then the potential for confusion does exist, which is why the Electoral Commission is so concerned about this. I'd now like to address the Amendments 46 and 47, made by the Honourable Member for Nottingham North on electoral registration and voting. Members in this House will be aware the Honourable Member was chair of the Select Committee in the previous Parliament. In fact, he was waving around one of their reports earlier on, and I would like to thank him for his committee's work on the important issue of registration. His amendments relate to automatic registration and online voting. This bill transfers order-making powers in Clause 4, in the new Section 12, that provide the Scottish Ministers with powers regarding the conduct of Scottish Parliament elections and the registration of electors at those elections. The Government considers that these will be sufficient for the Scottish Ministers to provide, should they wish, for both automatic registration and also, should they wish, for electronic voting at Scottish Parliamentary elections as well. The Government therefore considers these amendments are strictly unnecessary and beyond the remit of this bill to provide for. Honourable Members for Edinburgh South and Caerphilly have tabled a new Clause 11 which seeks to require the Electoral Commission to produce guidance into ways of further improving the electoral registration process in Scotland and of ensuring the completeness of the electoral registers in Scotland. Now, as per the Smith Commission agreement, this bill devolves functions of the Electoral Commission to the Scottish Parliament in relation to Scottish Parliament elections. The provisions in this bill will already allow the Scottish Parliament to make provisions for the Electoral Commission to produce such guidance in relation to Scottish parliamentary and local government elections in Scotland. And therefore, again, I don't think that this new clause is necessary, and I hope the Honourable Gentleman will be willing to withdraw it when the moment arrives. Moving on to individual elector registration, or IER, I would completely agree with the Honourable Member for Caerphilly, speaking on the opposition front bench. He said that it's essential that registers are as complete and as accurate as possible. I'm sure that Democrats on all sides of the House would echo that and applaud that sentiment. We certainly would want to ensure that that is happening wherever we can. And I can tell him that there is a report due from the Electoral Commission very shortly, which is designed to assess the effect of individual elector registration, where it has gone well, where it has progressed more slowly, and to assess what benefits have happened from it. I think it would therefore probably be premature to prejudge that report, but I'm sure that both he and I, and pretty much everybody else here, will be examining it in quite some detail when it comes out, and I'm sure that they will have some useful recommendations and some very important facts for us all to consider. Non-individual elector registered electors are those that were not amongst the 87% of the electorate who were data matched and automatically transferred to the new registers and who are yet to make a fresh application under the new system. So it's 13% of the original electoral rolls that were initially unmatched, and we've been whittling down that number. Unless their electoral registration officer has evidence to suggest these people are no longer eligible, they've been retained on the electoral register as carry-forward electors. The end of the transition to IER will be the point at which any of these remaining non-IER registered electors are automatically removed from the electoral registers in Great Britain. This amendment seeks to allow the Scottish Government to make regulations about the impact of the end of transition to IER on the completeness of the registers for the Scottish parliamentary and Scottish local government elections. But, Mr. Chairman, Clause 4 already gives Scottish ministers a broad power to make provision on matters relating to the conduct of Scottish parliamentary elections and local government elections, and in particular provision about the registration of electors. So the intention behind this amendment is to make provision to keep non-IER registered electors on the Scottish electoral registers beyond the end of the transition, but Scottish ministers could do so already under Clause 4 as currently drafted. This amendment would therefore not add anything, and I contend would be unnecessary. This amendment would therefore not add to these deliberations, and I hope that honourable members will withdraw this amendment and that we will therefore be able to proceed further.
Well, I know we're running out of time, so I don't want to detain the House. Listen to what the Minister has had to say, and we will not be pushing our amendments at this stage.
Amendment withdrawn.